The 1980s by far is the most detrimental decade when it comes to the Black family. And I'm going to read you some stats that reflect the percentages of two-parent households in different decades. In the 1950s, there were 80% of two-parent households. 1960s, 75%. 1970s, still holding on to 75%. Then the 80s hit. We dropped from 75% to 50%. Then the 80s are over, we hit the 90s, and it goes from 50% to 40%. And ever since then, it's been trickling down, and now we stand at 33 to 35%. So clearly, something happened in the 80s. It was a hot mess, okay? Now, if you talk to anyone who lived in the 80s, they will also tell you it was a hell of a time to be alive because it was really exciting and a lot of new things were coming on the scene culturally. But with that came a lot of problems. So I'm going to talk about that today. But before I get into that, welcome to Black to Bitcoin, where I talk about the wealth gap, the Black experience in America, and basically how we can build generational wealth, okay, through Bitcoin. All right, so I have my notes here. I'm going to talk about different things that came up when the 80s hit and things that directly affected mostly Black men being taken out of the household. Okay, so let's get into it. The first one was factory shutdowns. Now, this was a big deal because this was the financial strain of this time because so many Black men held factory jobs, and when they were taken away, there was that strain of taking care of their families. And something that has always been the case is that when Black men are struggling, they often will leave the household to benefit the rest of their family. And I know that sounds backwards, but one of the examples I can use that I used actually in another video I did on Black single mothers is that when the welfare system hit, a lot of Black men would leave the house because it was encouraged that single parent households could get more benefits. So the Black father would leave the house. So this was like the beginning of a financial strain. Okay? Then we had the big one is what I'll call it. And this was the war on drugs. The Reagan era, where Black men started being incarcerated at intense and extreme rates. And since slavery, this was actually the first time that Black men were physically removed from a household because there were so many incarcerations. So this automatically turned a lot of females and women into single mothers. So this was a huge destruction. And other than the welfare system, which became more relevant in the 90s, incarceration is considered the other biggest factor in why there are so many single mothers right now. All right. The third one, which was a thing, was the crack epidemic. The crack epidemic hit the Black community so hard that it disrupted not only family units, but it basically turned our poverty onto a different level. So you had basically families completely destroyed because their brothers, fathers, even the mothers, people were addicted to crack. Okay, so this turned a lot of households into single parent households or no households at all because kids were going into foster care at such high rates. So this was definitely a disruptor. And in certain cities, it was on the extreme end as well. So it was, it affected some cities more than others, but the 80s was very intense. And the drug epidemic and the crack epidemic was very extreme for the family. I think I have all of that. Oh, the other thing I did have for the crack epidemic is that this ended up really going into the financial side, because communities, they were so destroyed by this economically that now to this day, a lot of effects are still present from that time. The next one I have is something that generally happened to everybody that trickled into the Black community as well, and that is inflation and wage flattening. So this is pretty much when minimum wage, and I don't know the exact scale of it. I actually probably should have looked that up, but I don't know the exact scale. But this is when wages started being a little bit more steady and they weren't increasing as much. Now we know that the minimum wage does not rise fast at all. And like I said, I don't know the exact numbers, but for sure inflation started increasing, and 100% wages did not increase to keep up with the inflation. So this is when this decade was really big on that. So when you compound that with all the other issues, it caused financial harm. What does financial harm do? Again, it affects the Black household because a lot of times it can't be afforded. And just because of all the stats that exist, period, when it comes to Black people and holding jobs and any other statistics that are against or affect the Black community, anything that happens in the general population is always going to affect us more because we don't have an even playing field. Okay, so the whole inflation thing, and that's a big theme around this channel, is because I talk about inflation and how Bitcoin is the only monetary currency that 100%, I mean, so far has outdone the dollar. That inflation is a big deal, and it is a huge topic on many things, and there's no difference in how it affected the Black community in the 80s, okay? And then the last one I have also affects Black families and white families and everyone in between, and that's the fact that in the 80s, a lot of people were just getting divorces in general. This is when marriages started to crack. No pun intended. But I use crack, sometimes things work out. Anyways, this is when a lot of marriages started to crack. So divorces were on the rise, and there's no immunity for the Black community. So there was just the regular factor that a lot of divorces were happening. So a lot of Black families were disrupted in that way. Okay? So those are the things. And if you think about all of those things, that's just 5 of them. There probably are a lot more, but those 5 things are extreme things. They are things that just one of them disrupts the whole community. And you're talking about a decade that 5 of them happened. So I am going to do a recap on them, and then I'll give my little Bitcoin spiel because that's what has to happen. All right, so the first one was factory shutdowns, so Black men losing their jobs. 2, the war on drugs and the Reagan era, and I make sure I say his name because he is very responsible for a lot of our problems, and his name needs to be attached to destruction. Okay, so the war on drugs and the Reagan era. There were an immense amount of mass incarceration of Black men, so they were physically removed from the households. The crack epidemic, mothers and fathers were removed from households. Children went into foster care, just a whole effect on the economic status, the economic times, and that in itself also affects the Black family unit. Inflation and wage flattening. So the fact that inflation started really being intense, and by the way, inflation, it gets the way it is and it rises because of the US dollar being printed out of control and it losing its value. So let's just put that in there because, there's a reason. There's a reason I push Bitcoin, okay? It's because the US dollar is losing all its value. Anyways, but back to the point, inflation started being more intense. Then the last one was marriage rates were declining anyways. So just like white people or anyone else, black people were getting more divorces. Okay, so those are 5 things that happened in the 80s that really rocked the black family. And now I'm going to go into my little spiel about Bitcoin. Per usual, I will start the speech with, people, no one is going to save us. So, and all these things pretty much reflect that. Anything I ever say on this channel will reflect that. Every single thing on this list was because the government did it. Okay? Nothing sparked out of nowhere. So we have to take power into our own hands, and Bitcoin is a tactic. It is a tool to take financial sovereignty over money. Okay, it is a currency. It's not a crypto. It's not a stock. It's limited in supply, and pretty much anyone who owns it is going to be the people in power when the time comes. So I'm always pushing for black people to hold it so that we can have generational wealth, because we need it. And Bitcoin is a very good solution to it. And I won't go into all of the things about Bitcoin, but what I do want to really drive home is that Bitcoin is not just a currency. It is a FU to the system. That's why it was created in the beginning, okay? That is why it is structured the way it is, and it's limited in supply. It is a way to say FU to the system so that no one has control over your money. No banks, no government, no institutions, nobody. Only you can control your Bitcoin. And I feel that if all of us start collecting it, that we will be able to shorten and minimize the wage gap. Okay? So that's my Bitcoin spiel. Always got to put that in. But other than that, comment anything that you have to add about the 80s, good or bad. You know, if it was a time for you, tell me what you were doing, how you were acting, if you were, you know, wild or running free and all that good stuff. Or if you saw the actual effects of any of these things, put that in the comments as well, because I think it's very important for people to hear real stories about how these things have affected us. So definitely leave a comment, just, you know, how you feel about the 80s and anything that you have to add about it, okay? So other than that, hope you're having a great day. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a like, share it, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.